keratinocytes and fibroblasts help the nerves. They help regenerate nerves by secreting neurotrophins. So they're helping each other. The different systems are helping each other, helping us survive and heal. If we think about the immune system now, we'll move from nerves to the immune system. Anatomists divide it into peripheral and deep. The peripheral are those bits that are very close to the surface. So we have two lovely acronyms, SALT and MALT. SALT, those are the skin-associated lymphoid tissue components. MALT, mucosa-associated ones. And there's also superficial lymph nodes. All these, the light can get to easily, so they're affected by it directly, and you get lovely local effects. The deeper things, the light can only get to you can only get effects indirectly. The light can't get to all parts of the body if I just treat that. But by treating this area, I can get substances released that will indirectly affect the body. Distant effects occur. Remember, the cells communicate with each other. The regulators, a lot of them are readily accessed because they're superficial. And once you put light into the system, that system can amplify the effects of the light. These are called bystander effects. You put the light here and you get an effect over there. To get an effect in the body, you have to have light absorbed by some cells, but you can get effects distantly through the growth factors that they release and the other protein mediators, the cytokines and the chemokines. You can get direct effects if they're close to the surface. The light has to be absorbed by cytochromes. Then you get a chain reaction that stimulates growth factor release eventually, and the growth factors stimulate fibroblast proliferation and endothelial cell proliferation. But all these immune components are linked together. They're linked by lymph vessels and blood vessels, and the capillaries of these are very superficial. They're just under the epidermis. And there are a lot of them. Now, the longer you treat for, the more of the circulating blood will be affected by the light. So I think you should treat low and long. Use low powers, but for longer. Treat more of the circulating blood, have bigger effects. Location matters. These capillaries are close to the surface, so their contents can be affected directly by photons. Endocrine regulators, hormones, will be circulating, and they can be affected as well. And some lovely work has been done on the adrenal gland recently, also called the suprarenal gland. It's been found that if you use infrared laser irradiation of the adrenal region of patients with asthma, they make more hydrocortisone. That will reduce the number of asthma attacks, and it shortens the duration of the asthma attacks. So you've treated the back. You've treated the adrenal, but you've got effects in the lungs. Those are indirect, systemic effects. And remember, cortisone is anti-inflammatory. So, another take-home message. Cells can be affected by photons without being exposed to them directly. Provided you treat the body with the problem, you can get the problem resolved. So, direct effects that I've told you about already, and then there are indirect effects, deeper cells. They could be immune cells, or they could be cells in an area of damage, remote from where you irradiate. These can be affected indirectly by photons via the peripheral cells that have absorbed the protons and responded to them, for example, by secreting soluble protein mediators. And therefore, you put a little amount of energy in, and you get massive amplification in time and space of the effectiveness. It's a very efficient way, a very green way of giving energy and stimulating repair. All these are linked together by blood vessels, the capillaries, as I've explained before. So treat for a long period of time, and you'll expose a lot of more of the contents of the body, of the blood, to the light. So peripheral location means ready access to photons. The cells and the molecules in transit along the capillaries are affected directly. And then they travel to deeper parts of the body and affect those parts indirectly, amplifying the photonic effect in time and in space. Now this, published last year, beautiful bit of work that proves what I've been saying. Blood irradiation outside the body can affect the body. So, in this case, venous blood from a rat was extravasated, and then it was exposed to infrared diode laser, 830 nanometers, 5 minutes, reasonably long amount of time. So it was treated outside the body. The rat hasn't been shown the light, but then the treated blood is put back into the body. 4 hours later, an injury was made by injecting Freund's complete adjuvant, an inflammatory material, into the hind paw of the animal. What they found was that there was increased analgesia, increased expression of pro-opiomelanocortin, which is a precursor of beta-endorphin, and there was also the production of corticotrophin-releasing factor in a rat that hadn't been exposed to the light. It was some of its blood that had been. Now that is very neat, and they also found increased corticosteroid hormones in the inflamed tissues. A lovely demonstration of an indirect effect, a bystander effect. Parameters matter, get the right ones and you'll get a good effect. People talk about wavelength and power and energy and pulse repetition rate. I want them to start talking about exposure time and target sensitivity. The longer you treat for, the more of the circulating immune cells and stem cells will be exposed to the direct of photons. This will increase with the duration of radiation. Remember, low and long to get a good effect. Target sensitivity. Cells of injured tissues are more sensitive to environmental changes than those of intact tissue. So don't worry. You will get effects where you need them, where the injury is. Now let's move very quickly on to acceleration of delayed healing. We showed in the work I've already described to you that we could stimulate this by accelerating the resolution of inflammation so that we got more fibroblasts more rapidly. Phototherapy can accelerate the resolution of inflammation and therefore accelerate repair, provided you use the correct parameters. How does it do it? In part by stimulating the secretion of soluble protein mediators by beautiful cells like the macrophage. The macrophage is your best friend and your patient's best friend. Be nice to your macrophage. Treat them with laser, treat them with light. Don't terrorize them with cortisone. And this paper proves that light can affect cells that haven't absorbed it. We irradiated macrophages, we left them alone to secrete growth factors, then we took the culture medium and added that to fibroblasts that hadn't been near the light. And we found that we could speed up the proliferation of the fibroblasts. We found that some wavelengths were stimulatory and others weren't. And we found that the light didn't have to be coherent. It wasn't essential for biostimulation. It's the wavelength that really matters. And if we end by looking at chronic wounds, these are trapped in chronic inflammation. They aren't moving from inflammation to proliferation, and they can stay like that for years. Acute inflammation is good, you get healing. Chronic inflammation is bad. And there's a different group of chemicals in an acute wound which has gone on to proliferation than there is in a chronic wound that's stuck in inflammation. The acute wound has got not many pro-inflammatory, but a lot of anti-inflammatory cytokines. It's got more growth factors. Chronic hasn't. You get low protease, high protease there. There's a different cocktail of materials in an acute wound that's gone on to heal than there is in a chronic wound. My recipe for healing a chronic wound is to make them acute by debridement. Then start treating with light as soon as possible. You'll accelerate the resolution of inflammation, and if you improve the health of the patient, or get the patient to improve their own health, show them what to do and get them to do it, then those wounds will heal, and they'll do so rapidly, even in the sick and old, and also in the young and sick. What about the future? I'd like someone to start to treat the adrenal glands and see if that will reduce chronic inflammation. I think it will. And then stop treating the adrenals, debride the wound, initiate acute inflammation, treat with laser, and you'll speed up the healing process. What about differential effects? Maybe different parameters of light will affect which mediators and proteases and protease inhibitors are found. Maybe light can be used to encourage the cells to produce the mediators the body needs when it needs them. So we need to know which mediators are produced and when, and then we need to find out which parameters will get the cell to do it. I think we will be able to use light to change the ingredients of the soluble mediator cocktail. If a wound is stuck in chronic inflammation, it's got lots of pro-inflammatory materials there. If it's healing, it gets rid of those, and we've got anti-inflammatories. We've got growth factors. If we can do this, then chronic inflammation could become acute, and chronic wounds would be eliminated. I think what we need to do is to change the soluble protein mediator and protease cocktail, and that will move, or it should move, chronic wounds from inflammation to proliferation. You know, sometimes you need a Merlot or maybe a Bloody Mary. At other times, maybe a Chardonnay or perhaps a White Russian's more appropriate. We need to know what the body needs, and I think we can use light to give it what it needs. So thank you for listening, and may the light be with you and also with your patients. So please, let there be light, and thank you for listening. 5 seconds to go. 3, 2, 1.
Countdown.
Done it.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, fantastic. I think you'll agree. Very enlightening. Sorry about that. I think we'll have time for very few questions, but
you can talk to me outside.
You can talk to Mary outside. Anybody with a question? Yes, Dr. Oswald.
Hello. I don't know what this is working on, but you can hear me, can you? It's working. Is it working?
Yes,
okay.
It's working.
Interesting, quite interesting. But as a physician or a surgeon, would you advise us to go as far as a post-operative management of patients, to call them back after 72 hours, 48 hours,
well, I wouldn't call
and
them
then
back. I treat them on the operating table while they're still recovering.
you can't do that, can you? You're contradicting yourself, because because you then will stop your acute inflammatory process, which you don't want to.
No, I don't want to stop it, and you won't stop it. You will accelerate the resolution of that process. We shorten its duration. We don't change its intensity.
How can you, I mean, the wound healing, as you say, starts with acute inflammatory process. Well, if you use your biomodulation or phototherapy on the operating table, aren't you reducing the inflammatory process and go into proliferative process?
Well, the experimental results that are out there demonstrate that you're not doing that, though they haven't done it on the operating table. But when we treated our little fairy mice, we treated them while they were on the equivalent of the operating table. We treated them while they were still unconscious. You need acute inflammation. What you don't want is for it to go on for too long, because then you don't move the body onto the proliferative phase where granulation tissue comes. You want to shorten its duration, not to reduce its intensity.
So would you say at the end of the
I'll need to cut in.
You would do phototherapy?
I'm sorry, I'll need to cut in there,
okay.
Dr. Oswald, I beg your pardon. Right, we've come to the end of this session. Mary and Dr. Oswald will go out and have a wee chat outside. I'd like, on your behalf, to say a sincere thank you to Mary for yet another superb educational experience. Mary, thank you very much.